deep in space, Jocks grapples toward the derelict ship. His suit breaches as he latches on, alarms blaring. He's committed. This desperate salvage mission is now life or death. Her words hit me like a cold splash. Refuse to guarantee your own grandson's debt, then consider yourself unwelcome, my eldest declared, standing in my modest living room. The scent of brewing tea filled the air as her voice cut through the quiet. I waited a moment before replying. At 80 years old, I understood that some unspoken truths are far more impactful than any heated debate. My silence spoke volumes, reflecting a lifetime of hard lessons learned and a stubborn resolve forged in the fires of adversity. Amidst the stakes, Sarah gambled on a hunch, risking everything. However, Ben hesitated, torn between trust and doubt. Sensing the looming danger, the hand towel, retaining heat from the freshly dried glassware, lay heavy in my grasp. Daniel had just bolted, the slam of the front door still echoing. His harsh, parting words lingered like a bitter taste. It's just a signature, Mom. I've got things covered. I don't need a handout. But it was much more than a mere signature. I'd been down this road before with my eldest, and I knew the weight of guaranteeing a loan for someone just starting out. I thought I taught him better than this, Martha sighed, plunging the casserole dish into the soapy water. He needs reliable transportation for his new position. He is working so hard. But apparently, it's never enough for you. I carefully placed the towel on the counter. He's young. He has time. He can rely on public transportation until he builds up some credit. Martha rounded on me. We took you in, didn't we? After your accident, we shifted everything around. That extra bedroom was going to be my art studio, but we made room for you. It was the truth. I had moved into their quaint countryside home following my fall, when living alone became too risky and the silence became too deafening. As tensions escalated, reaching a boiling point as the conflict intensified. They shifted their belongings to make room, and I appreciated the gesture, or so I believed, until that very instant. Don't imagine you can simply live here without contributing to this household, Ethan stated, his voice now softer. I gazed at him, truly observed him. He wasn't the adolescent whose bike I used to repair. He was a weary man burdened with rent, a demanding job, and a daughter who hadn't yet learned responsibility. Yet I wasn't merely an extension of their requirements. I was an individual, and my assistance came at a price. That evening, I remained awake in the spare room, shadows dancing across the walls. My spirit ached, not from physical aging, but from the understanding that I no longer belonged. Somewhere between his statement and her expectations, something within me transformed, not out of resentment, but out of lucidity. Around 1 a.m., the small space heater in my room ceased to function. Initially, I suspected a tripped circuit. I inspected the power switch, the wall socket. Nothing. The remainder of the apartment was illuminated and lively. The kitchen light, the laptop's vibrant glow in the study. Only my room was freezing. I lay there, eyes wide open, engulfed by the cold. The silence throughout the apartment felt warmer than the breeze entering through the slightly open window. I attempted to turn on the heater again. No response. I rose slowly, joints stiff, protesting, put on my jacket, shuffled across the floor, in socks, and opened the door to peek into the hallway. Soft, yellow light. Everything else was functioning properly. I closed the door once more. The cold wasn't accidental. The next morning, no one addressed the matter. Maya had already left for school by the time I entered the kitchen. Ethan stood by the counter, drinking coffee with a donut, scrolling through his phone. Good morning, I greeted. He nodded, eyes focused on the screen. I grabbed my cup, filled the kettle, and stood in silence beside him. The kind of silence that creates tension in your head. My space heater didn't work last night, I mentioned quietly, not accusingly, simply stating a fact. He shrugged, still staring at his phone. Maybe something overloaded. Everything else was fine. Another shrug. Asked Maya. She was tinkering with the electrical panel the other day. I offered no response. I prepared my tea, sat at the far end of the table, and stirred slowly, the spoon clinking softly, like a reminder. I could have insisted, questioned why she would touch the electrical panel, but I knew that pushing the subject would make me the issue. The reason for the apartment's strained atmosphere, the burden. I'd grown tired of that role. Later that afternoon, I inspected the electrical panel myself. Everything was as it should be, switches in place, No loose wires, simply rows of wires and a humming noise. The next evening, it was the lamp. I went to plug in my desk lamp, the only source of brightness that helped me when I read. Nothing. I tried the second outlet, then the one by the door. Useless. I carried the lamp into the hallway. It worked there perfectly fine. It was subtle, a gradual decline, not a confrontation. No one shouted. No one locked the door. They simply eroded my comfort, bit by bit. I didn't bring it up again. Not the space heater, not the lamp. I went about my days as though nothing had changed. I cooked when asked, hung clothes to dry, walked the dog, nodded politely at Maya's brief hellos. But at night, in that cold room, the heater silent, the outlets dead, I felt the weight of a message they weren't bold enough to express. You're no longer welcome here. It's an unusual feeling, understanding that your presence has transitioned from necessary to tolerated. You tread lightly, speak softly. Inquiries ceased, each one echoing as a grievance, each syllable a disturbance to their delicate balance. Evenings found me on the veranda, my gaze fixed on the circle where neighboring houses pulsed with energy lamps, illuminating entryways, vehicles arriving. I would observe those almost strangers, bringing in provisions, guiding canines, conversing in hushed tones, then fading behind drapes drawn with care, unlike entrances sealed shut in fury. I dreamt of dwelling where descent didn't equate to extinguishing the flame. It was then that the notion arose, tentative at inception, nearly contrite, yet unwavering. Departure was possible. The pivotal juncture arrived. Everything teetered, suspended. An irreversible choice demanded immediate action. Destiny hung precariously. The notion clung to Maya throughout the night, even as she huddled beneath an inadequate comforter, yearning for a refreshing breeze. It wasn't fueled by animosity, nor by a desire for retribution. It was a liberation, a gasp for air after fearing she'd suffocate. Escape. Her resources were limited, a modest annuity, barely sufficient to cover basic needs, and some savings, accumulated with Leo before his passing, but it was enough for something modest, something peaceful, something that was solely her own. That night, she experienced her first restful sleep in weeks, brief, yet undisturbed by the sounds of others or the flick of a light switch. The idea had taken root, bringing with it a sense of tranquility. The following morning, she contacted the credit union, not to request assistance, but to ascertain the extent of control she still had over her own life. The representative's tone was polite, impersonal. Yes, Ms. Dubois, your account is in good standing. Would you like me to review the current balance? She perched on the edge of the spare bed, her bed now, clutching the wireless phone tightly. She gazed at the dormant air conditioner in the corner and whispered, "Yes, please." The representative provided the figure. It wasn't substantial, but it belonged to her. She expressed her gratitude and disconnected the call. Her fingers trembled, not from anxiety, but from a sense of potential. Later, she sat at the kitchen counter with Chloe, who was engrossed in her laptop, one earbud in place. The tapping of keys and the muffled sound of a streamed lecture filled the air. Maya didn't demand Chloe's attention. She simply waited. Chloe sighed, removed the earbud, and looked up. "Is something the matter?" Maya hesitated. "Remember the savings account that Leo and I established for unforeseen circumstances?" Chloe narrowed her gaze. "The one you swore you wouldn't touch." "Yes, I may need to access it." Chloe's fingers hovered above the keyboard. "For what purpose?" "I haven't made a decision yet," Maya replied softly, stirring her coffee. "But I believe it's time for me to start formulating some plans." Chloe frowned. "Mom, if this is about co-signing that auto loan..." "It's not," Maya interjected, meeting her gaze. "It's about autonomy. I no longer feel like I belong here." A weighty silence descended once more. "You're overreacting," Chloe stated finally. "This has been a difficult period. You're taking everything too personally." Maya nodded. Perhaps, but she knew better. The remainder of the week unfolded with strained politeness. She did laundry, refilled the bird feeder, and kept to herself. Noah didn't speak to her, except to inquire if she'd seen his wallet. She hadn't. He mumbled something and departed. Maya ignored it. On Friday morning, she walked several blocks to the community center, sat at a computer near the window, and browsed rental listings. Apartments, studios, independent living facilities, anything affordable. Many were too distant or too dilapidated to be considered. but one listing caught he. Attention, a compact bungalow in a tranquil district of East Cleveland, on Elmwood Avenue. It boasted a sunroom and a communal garden. Single story, utilities included. She printed the information, folded it neatly, and placed it in her handbag, as if it were a precious artifact. After a long struggle, Martha finally triumphed over her doubts and made the difficult decision to embrace a future filled with both uncertainty and hope. Returning home, I laid the flyer on the bedside table, next to the humming fan. Later, as I diced carrots for the stew, Marie lingered, nursing a glass of lemonade, the air filled with the scent of bay leaves and browning beef. "You know," she commented casually, "I spoke with Ethan. He's still really bothered." I continued chopping. "He feels rejected, I suppose, by you." I nodded. "He'll manage." A pause. Then, "Perhaps he wouldn't feel so bad if you hadn't dismissed him so abruptly." I placed the knife down. "I didn't dismiss him," I replied evenly. "I was looking out for myself." She scoffed. "He's family. Isn't that what family's for?" I held her gaze. "To co-sign ventures that are obviously risky. To turn a blind eye when you know I'm struggling." The words lingered in the air between us. She grabbed her glass and retreated. That night, I dialed the number on the flyer. "A pleasant man," Arthur answered. He confirmed the apartment was still available and offered a viewing on Monday morning. I thanked him, my heart racing. My voice sounded fragile, even to my own ears. After hanging up, I surveyed the room. The bookshelf I'd painted, the rug I'd chosen to brighten the space. None of it belonged to me. Saturday, I sorted through my possessions alone. I opened the bottom drawer of the worn dresser, the one Marie promised to replace, but never did, and pulled out a box tucked away beneath some old t-shirts. Inside were Sarah's birth certificate, the lease to our first shop, faded letters, and a yellowed envelope marked red later in her handwriting. I didn't open it. I knew what it contained. Her final note, scribbled from her hospital bed. I'd read it once, and it had broken me. I simply needed to hold it for a while. Next, I moved to the closet. A few sweaters, 2 decent blouses, comfortable shoes, the jacket with frayed edges I couldn't discard. I took mental inventory, 3 boxes, perhaps 4. It was odd how my life could be contained in a small collection of belongings. Odd, and somehow liberating. That evening, I sat on the front steps, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunset paint the sky behind the neighboring buildings. The living room window was open, and I overheard Marie speaking on the phone. "She's been acting strangely, like she's planning something but won't say anything." A pause. "No, I didn't ask about the investment again. What's the point?" She was pretty clear. Another pause. "She should be grateful." I adjusted everything. I made space. I looked at my hands, gnarled, rough, from years of work and toil. They'd once held her when she was frightened, comforted her when she was sad, guided her when she was lost. Had she forgotten, or had I overestimated what that meant? Slowly, I rose and went inside quietly. Sunday morning, I boarded the train to the city center, wearing my reliable black shoes with sensible heels, a notepad in my bag. I wanted to appear as someone who was still in charge of her own life. Arthur greeted me at the entrance of the Elm Street building with a smile and a set of keys. He was younger than me by 15 years, but his eyes were kind, his demeanor calm. The apartment was smaller than I had imagined, a rectangular living space, a compact kitchen, a bedroom just large enough for a single bed and a small closet, but it was bright, the walls clean, the windows large. Potted plants lined the windowsill, and a small garden lay in the back. "This is the only unit available," Arthur explained, showing me around. "Mostly retirees here. It's peaceful," Martha, the property manager, reassured me. "It's generally tranquil here, and I'm right next door if you need anything." I agreed, reflecting on the stark contrast to my sister Deb's always chaotic home. No blaring stereo, no arguments, just genuine serenity. I completed the form with Martha's pen. "We'll reach a decision within a few days. If approved, the place is yours," she announced. My heart leaped with anticipation. Along with my copy, she gave me a brochure on the resident flower boxes. "Many of our tenants enjoy cultivating small gardens out front." I beamed. Perhaps some sunflowers or marigolds. Returning to Deb's, my absence went unnoticed. Her son Tim was absorbed in fixing some gadget. and Deb was at the market. I placed the brochure in the desk and sat on the couch, a quiet realization settling in. Something fundamental had shifted within me, reaching peak fulfillment. From minute 46 19 seconds to 59 minutes 56 seconds, ink was barely dry on the agreement when Beatrice received the keys from Mr. Abernathy, whose broad smile filled the doorway. "Welcome to your new chapter, Miss Eleanor. Make yourself at home." Eleanor took the heavy metal, turning it over in her palm, a tangible weight of possibility. "Thank you, I think this is what I needed." Mr. Abernathy helped carry in a few essential cartons, each meticulously labeled: art supplies, a set of antique brushes, a sketch of her late husband, David, under a blossoming cherry tree. He was discreet, offering only a kind, "I'm just down the hall, in 14B, if you require anything at all." Once he departed, Eleanor stood in the heart of the studio apartment, slowly rotating. The polished concrete floor felt cool beneath her bare feet. The ventilation system whispered a constant, low drone. Beyond the expansive windows, the city park sprawled, a tapestry of autumn colors yielding to winter's edge. She placed David's sketch on the drafting table and opened a carton containing paints her vision. There was a single, modern chair, a gift from her son, Michael. After she commented on how comfortable it looked, but she had never used it until now. She positioned it facing the park, filled a carafe with water, and prepared her palette. The colors seemed more vibrant here, not because the pigments were superior, but because she was free to mix them. She added a touch of linseed oil and settled into the chair, holding a brush in her hand. For the first hour, she did absolutely nothing, merely observed the light, shifting across the park, and felt the quiet settle around her like a familiar shawl. That afternoon, she unpacked her canvases, her charcoal pencils, draped a worn smock over the chair, and arranged her tools in the small storage closet. That evening, she microwaved a bowl of vegetable chili she had brought in a container, ate at the small counter space, the only dining area. No judgments, no interruptions, no one questioning the spice blend she preferred. She rinsed the bowl, dried it, and returned it to the cupboard. As she changed into her flannel nightshirt, her cell phone vibrated. "Michael," she silenced it, allowing it to go to voicemail, watching the screen light up. She didn't listen to the message. She set the phone face down and slipped into bed. The sheets smelled faintly of sandalwood from the incense she had burned earlier. She drew the covers up to her neck and gazed out the large window. The lights of downtown Seattle blurred in the distance. She murmured into the stillness, "I'm here," and that was enough. The following morning, she awoke before dawn. An ingrained habit, her body still remembered a life lived under different constraints. But here, there was only serenity, a welcome serenity. She remained in bed for a while, listening to the building's hum and the rain tapping against the window. Then she arose, put on her robe, and brewed herbal tea, not the mass-produced tea bags Michael favored. She poured it into her favorite ceramic mug and stepped onto the balcony. The air was crisp, biting with approaching winter, smelling of damp earth and distant rain. Across the courtyard, a man in a thick sweater swept leaves from his patio. He glanced up and nodded. "New tenant?" "Yes," she replied, raising her mug slightly. "Moved in yesterday. Welcome. I'm Daniel, 12A. We've got a painting group that meets Wednesdays if you're interested." "Thank you," she said. "I might be." He waved and resumed his task. Eleanor lingered for another moment, sipping tea, watching a seagull circle overhead. Then she checked Michael's voicemail. "Mom, I saw your old house. Guess you actually left. I don't know why you didn't tell me anything. I'm angry. Your granddaughter's angry. It's like you disappeared. No concern, only complaints about her actions." She deleted the message, not out of resentment, but out of self-preservation. His daughter, Lily, called that night. "Grandma," she said, her voice soft. "I'm fine," Eleanor responded. "Where are you?" She's just outside the city limits, not far," Clara admitted, pausing. "Why didn't you just tell me?" her grandson Leo pressed. "Because you never actually asked, sweetie. You were just upset I wasn't agreeing with you." Silence filled the space. "I'm not saying this to hurt you," Clara continued gently. "Sometimes, people keep things private because they have to." "Can I see her?" Leo questioned. "Not now, honey. Maybe before too long, but not this moment." "Okay, Grandma," he responded, and the call ended. Clara remained at the kitchen table, her tea growing cold, a single lamp illuminating the room. She didn't weep, nor did she feel shattered. Instead, she felt complete, perhaps for the first time in ages. This little house, with its sticky windows and worn-out floor, was where she rediscovered herself. Later that week, she visited her attorney, David, a dependable man in his 50s, whose expertise had been invaluable since her husband, George, passed away. She revised her will, removing her daughter, Martha, as the main beneficiary, not out of anger, but acceptance. She established a grant for single parents seeking vocational skills, something she considered herself after George's passing. For Leo, she created a minor account, accessible when he turned 23, contingent upon him finishing some form of certification, technical training, college, whatever. This wasn't discipline, it was guidance. Leaving his office, she purchased a single white lily from the local shop, placing it in a vase near George's photograph on the mantelpiece. He seemed content there, basking in the light. That night, she prepared a salad, uncorked a bottle of white wine she had been saving for an occasion, and offered a toast to independence, to understanding, to belated choices that continue to have importance. Afterward, there was a plea for action, urging them to apply the lessons learned without delay. The time to act was now, they were told. Evelyn appeared nearly a week later. I was arranging succulents on the bookshelf at Cheveria, said Dame Simpa Vivem, when a tapping sound reached me. For light knocks, the security camera showed her arms stiff at her sides, scarf wound tight. I opened the door just enough to peek out. Evelyn. Hello, mother. No warmth. May I enter? I gave way, allowing her entrance. She paused in the middle of the living area of my studio, surveying it as if it were a doctor's office she'd been forced to visit. It's more compact than I pictured, was her assessment. It suits me, I countered. Why keep it secret? I didn't. You simply weren't listening to the volume at which I spoke. A faint wince, barely perceptible. Marco mentioned he dropped by. He did. She drifted, her hand skimming the surface of a shelf, a lamp, pausing at David's portrait. I assumed you were merely venting, she uttered quietly, that you'd get it out of your system and return. I wasn't venting, Evelyn, I was finished. She lowered herself onto the sofa, as if it might crumble beneath her. You taught me to be resilient, she said. I fear I misinterpreted that as being unyielding. Perhaps, I conceded. I didn't know how to react when you arrived, she confessed. I felt unable to offer you solace without relinquishing my own peace. I never requested you to relinquish anything. Just allow me room to exist. She studied her folded hands. I persuaded myself I was assisting, but I began to resent it. I permitted Marco to address you in ways he shouldn't have, I reasoned. You were indebted to us. I dedicated decades, I stated. My energy, my resources, my patience, and the instant I demurred, the drawbridge started rising. I realize, she murmured, and I am ashamed I only comprehended it. Once you had departed, silence lingered, broken only by the ticking of a clock on the wall. I'm not here to implore you to come home, she declared. I understand it is too late. I nodded slowly. I only wished to express my regret. It wasn't a dramatic display of remorse, no tears, no begging, just a handful of words too delayed in their delivery. Acknowledged, I replied. However, I am not returning. That residence ceased being mine a considerable time ago. She nodded once, rose, walked to the threshold, and hesitated. Might we commence anew from this juncture? I regarded her not the child I had nurtured, not the detached figure from the kitchen months past, merely a daughter striving to communicate without defenses. We might commence something, I allowed. Not anew. There will be no regression, only progression. Her posture eased subtly, her expression softened. Very well, she responded, and exited, closing the door with care. The season subtly morphed. Spring yielded to early summer. The community garden behind my apartment overflowed with colors I lacked names for. Agnes gifted me a sprig from her rosemary bush, and we planted it beside my doorstep. They are adaptable and hardy, she commented. Like myself, I reflected, but kept silent. I joined the weekly knitting group 5 women, all past 70, each possessing narratives they weren't compelled to share immediately. We discussed books, local events, aches in our knees, updated recipes. There existed a quiet camaraderie, the unspoken kind. No one inquired as to why I had relocated. They merely made room at the table and passed the yarn basket. I otherwise maintained a solitary existence, reading extensively, cooking simply, walking to the farmer's market weekly, purchasing only what pleased me. I acquired a compact stereo, like the one David and I took to the beach. One Saturday, I played it on the balcony, listening to Ella Fitzgerald as butterflies danced through the flower bed. It was then that I wept, not sharp anguish or fury, but a deep, silent weeping. The tears came, a torrent of release for burdens carried far too long, for stifled dreams, for enduring years of subtle diminishment, wondering if solace would ever arrive. I wept because I had weathered it, emerged on the other side. And now, I possessed this, not a fairy tale, but independence, respect, a lamp that illuminated my space at my command. My son, David, phoned occasionally, infrequent but improved. He didn't urge visits, avoided dredging up the past. Once, he remarked, "Chloe's shifted since she saw you. Mom is more punctual now at the bakery. Bought a scooter with her earnings." I simply responded, "That's positive, David," and I truly felt it. Chloe sent a digital card for my birthday. "Dear Gran, whenever I budget for supplies, I think about your advice. Thanks for teaching me financial responsibility is crucial. Best, Chloe." I filed it in my documents folder alongside a photo of Emily. Different expressions of love, both cherished. The studio apartment felt authentically mine now. Paintings adorned the walls. Rosemary thrived on the balcony, a small fountain replacing an old statue. My requirements were simple. One afternoon, organizing the pantry, my thoughts drifted back to the period when my health had deteriorated, how I existed, more resigned than distressed. And I smiled, not with resentment, but with understanding. That decline, as unpleasant as it was, revealed everything, the degree to which my agency had been eroded within that context, and how amplified it became upon establishing my own domain. I didn't demand dramatic resolutions, no apologetic relatives or guilt-ridden family. I needed a place where my affirmation mattered, and my dissent didn't jeopardize my well-being. Last week, I hung a prism in the sun catcher, multifaceted, crystal and delicate chain. It only refracts light when positioned precisely. But when it does, it's vibrant, like something rediscovering its brilliance. This dwelling has provided that for me, not an abandonment, not a refuge, a revitalization. I recollected the sensation of being perceived as a complete person, not a background presence, not a burden. I've accepted the reality that David and I might never regain our former closeness. But we communicate now, cautiously, with fewer points of contention. He occasionally sends snapshots: Chloe at the bakery, the dog in the backyard, the vegetable patch they cultivated without my involvement. They're adapting to navigate life without me. And I'm realizing I was never destined to fade simply because my assistance wasn't required. My friend, Beatrice, invited me for brunch last week, avocado toast on her front porch as the day grew brighter. She shared, numerous individuals our age assume they've concluded their narrative, that this is mere anticipation. However, prioritizing your own needs, that might constitute the most significant chapter to date. I concurred, because it resonated deeply. I had existed so long within others' expectations that I lost sight of constructing a life on my own terms. Now, each dawn, I raise the blinds, tend to my garden, read in the tranquility, procure my own provisions, my own schedule, and no one extinguishes the light when I disagree. When the sun reflects through that prism, I am reminded, this is mine, this moment, this place, this tranquility. If you're encountering this and something in your life feels like a gradual dissolution, if your presence is tolerated rather than celebrated, if your silence is interpreted as consent, recognize you're not too advanced in years to begin anew. You're not belated in safeguarding your integrity. You're not self-centered for declaring enough. And if you've been led to believe your refusal is a betrayal, remember, your well-being isn't a luxury, it's your entitlement. And it's never too late to seize it. If this resonated with you, pass it on. Another might need to hear it. Eleanor yearned for reassurance that opportunity hadn't passed her by. The porch offered solace. Wind chimes danced in the breeze. Sunlight warmed the daisies, and a distant melody seemed to whisper hope.